Thank you very much. I'm going to speak about 4 points: Australian consumer law, greenwashing, offsets, and a little bit about some competition questions relevant to climate change. The Australian consumer law, section 18, provides that a person must not, in trade or commerce, engage in conduct that is misleading or deceptive, or that is likely to mislead or deceive. Section 18 is very broad. The test is whether the conduct is deceptive or misleading to an ordinary consumer, and consumers typically have a poor knowledge about the validity of claims made in this field. Misleading conduct can include silence or omission. The intention of the person engaging in the conduct is irrelevant, it's just, is it misleading? And it can include false predictions if there are not reasonable grounds for making them, or if the prediction should have been qualified or is not. Other sections of the Act prohibit false and misleading representations about specific aspects of goods and services. A business can't falsely represent goods as being a particular standard, quality, value, grade, style, model, having a particular history or particular use. Goods must comply with any description that's provided on their advertising or labelling. That's relevant to many claims about recycled and recyclable content, for example, or carbon neutrality. And a business can't make false claims about sponsorship, approval, performance characteristics, accessories, uses and benefits they don't have, nor false claims about the nature, manufacturing process, characteristics, suitability for the purpose or the quality of any goods or services. Now, the ACCC has also mentioned the need to consider the whole life of a product when making a claim about carbon neutrality. A claim can't, for example, be just about, say, the manufacturing process and not its actual use and operation of that product. It can't, in other words, be a partial assessment. It can't be just about a subset of products or activities. Claims must be able to be substantiated. The ACCC can require substantiation notices to it. Now, coverage. The law applies to persons engaged in trade or commerce, which incidentally includes industry trade associations. The law generally does not apply to government or the ACCC. It does apply, however, where governments are engaged in trade or commerce, like public land and like Australia Post. Now, a very important question is whether a government agency that gets significant fees for its services, say they get a lot of income from licensing or certification and so on, is that engaged in trade or commerce and covered by the Act? Now, in some cases, it is, has been. So the government agency couldn't be assumed to be immune from if it's carrying on a business where it involves profit, repetition in purchases and business transactions, like contracts, advertising and promotion. But is it engaged in trade or commerce? There's a real possibility that climate active is covered by the Act, but the challenging question for the ACCC and ultimately the Federal Court, High Court, is whether it's found to be engaged in trade or commerce, or whether it's just implementing certain statutory requirements and specifications. The Australia Institute has made a complaint about climate active to the ACCC. They'll require a decision by it, and also it could be taken by the Australia Institute or someone else to the courts if they don't like the ACCC answer. Now, it's also worth noting that if a firm merely advertises that it has a certificate or something like that from the government, even if the certificate was wrongly given, the firm's in the clear if it just says it's been certified. So let's say a firm does make a false claim that it's carbon neutral, obviously can be sued by the ACCC or privately. But if it simply says we have a certificate from the government, from Climate Active, saying we're carbon neutral, then that is not misleading or deceptive and couldn't really be litigated. There is another question, slightly more, it's a possibility that if the business misled Climate Active about its claims, it could possibly be covered. That would be quite a big stretch legally if you're familiar with these sorts of cases. And another point to bear in mind is that in general, the seller of a product, a retailer, is liable for false and misleading claims, even if it innocently is selling something not knowing that at an earlier stage of production there is something false and misleading. If the outcome is false and misleading due to upstream activities, it's still liable. So that's a few bits about the basis of the law. Now, I might just say on this coverage another thing. Years ago, we took the Weather Bureau, the Bureau of Meteorology, BOM, or whatever it's called now. It's just had some branded guys that tell you, stop calling itself BOM. We took it to court, not for bad forecasts, but because some monopolisation activity we weren't going to. And in the end, that action didn't go to a full court case. It was really interesting, is it covered or not by the Act? We thought it was. That forced major change on BOM. The government decided they better clean up anyway, and they did. So there's also some value in trying to get a test case going. The ACCC's priorities for going to court include sort of important cases testing how far the law goes. Now, enforcement. The law is enforced by the ACCC. ASIC also has a role in regard to investment products where there are misleading or deceptive claims. The investment is being made in carbon neutral products. When that's not the case, that would be a breach of the law. And Andrew has mentioned to me something I hadn't quite picked up, that possibly the ASIC law covers cases where a person does misleading or deceptive conduct. There's no letter as there is in the competition law if you're a government agency. It's a possibility. And we may want to comment on that. Now, very importantly, private action is possible to enforce the law. So individuals, NGOs and others can go to court. The ACCC has no monopoly in that field. They may face costs, including costs if they lose the case, but private litigation is very important. And the most important remedy in today's context is just getting an injunction or court order to stop behaviour. Damages are a possibility, and there are also penalties for those specific forms of false representation that I mentioned. Now, today I'm just talking about, as it were, my patch, the ACCC, ASIC and what they could do, and other safeguards. I just want to acknowledge that that's a slightly limited approach, because it's the behaviour of the government that worries me. And you can have some agencies like the ACCC going for them. The ACCC is pretty fearless in these matters, but that's when things have gone wrong. I would like more to be done at source about these matters, but I'm going to stick more to my area. Okay, greenwashing. Greenwashing claims abound these days, as Sarah mentioned earlier. These state that in some way are good or serves as environmentally friendly, carbon neutral, or the like. And they're very widespread. They can relate to small household items like nappies, toilet paper cleaners, detergents, major white goods and appliances, water, energy, electricity, and so on and so forth. There's been quite a lot of work and cases and stuff done by the ACCC about greenwashing, but not very much in relation to carbon neutral, but more traditional misrepresentations, that my product is fully recycled, but it's not, that sort of thing. Now, I also just mentioned that from my most casual observations, that most big Australian businesses claim they are carbon neutral, and very large numbers have that carbon neutral certificate or net zero claims and so on. On offsets, obviously a lot's been said about offsets, including today, and on Four Corners. I just will focus on Climate Active, which is sponsored by the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water, which operates a carbon neutral certification scheme, been mentioned quite a bit today. Now, I'm concerned about its approach to issuing certificates. It's issued certificates to fossil producing companies and to electricity businesses. Examples of former include Tokyo Gas, which is involved in a big way in Northwest Gas, the big gas things up in the northwest of Australia, Ampol, Cooper Energy, AGO Energy Australia. So they're all certified as carbon neutral, and as you know, to get the finding that you're carbon neutral or zero carbon, it doesn't matter whether or not you've reduced emissions as long as you've got sufficient offsets. And now, but when you start looking at the claims that have been accepted, I've only done so in a superficial way, but others have looked much more deeply. The claims about offsets may only come into being in later years, or they may relate to reduced intensity, that is, fewer emissions per unit of output, but if output's going up, you're still going to rise in emissions, you can get it. And Climate Active seems to have a low standard for substantiation of claims. We've heard a lot of these things already today. And the claims relate only to carbon emission reductions in one part of the business or for partial or not whole of life features. And that is basically, as far as I can see, how the fossil fuel companies manage to get certification of a bit of their business. Their head office is carbon neutral, and then all the production activities aren't mentioned, but they still get the label. Now, and also when you look at that trademark, it's very simple. It just says Climate Active, carbon neutral, and nothing more, no details. But it does impress consumers. Come back to a couple of aspects of that, and I just want to get on to another topic, competition. Now, businesses sometimes want to collaborate on dealing with climate change matters. The competition law does not prohibit business collaboration unless it is anti-competitive in terms of the provisions of the competition law. If there's collaboration involves a competitive variable, it can be authorised by the ACCC if there's an offsetting public benefit. Now, it's also worth saying that widespread false greenwashing harms competition, obviously. It harms genuine competitors and it gets consumers to buy things they don't want to. But there are a more general set of competition issues. That is that when governments are doing all these new things about renewables, regulations and developing new products and so on, then once again they're not covered by the competition law. But governments often intentionally or inadvertently set up arrangements that are harmful to competition in the long run. Businesses often push for this. They've got a terrific product. Oh, I need a monopoly of some sort. Or they want a standard set for this type of product, and that standard suits big incumbent players and stops potential competitors, small people, coming in, and so on. So I just want to deliver a big warning about at all times in the whole field of climate action activity to watch that governments don't inadvertently or intentionally do things that harm competition. Now, just for suggestions for action, the test case should be done. I hope the ACCC goes your way and tests the law if it has to. And I think if the ACCC jumped in, that would have quite a big effect on behaviour anyway in the government. That you could, particularly with the new laws going through, get in some amendments to clarify that the consumer law provisions about the sector things then kind of apply in this bill, apply to certification, for example. And then you can take climate active to court and get injunctions. And other things besides certifications. So we'll have to work on the drafting, but that's one idea. Now, I've never favoured the idea that the consumer law should apply to all government actions. I think could be tweaked and extended into a field like this. Now, also, you could establish some kind of independent tribunal which could make rulings on the integrity of offset decisions by the government or its agencies. The Chubb report hinted pretty softly at separating the regulatory activity from the issuing of certificates, which in principle is the right direction to go, but needs to go quite a long way. A battle-hardened regulator, I can tell you, I could imagine a very soft separation of the activities, and it mightn't be statutorily independent and fearless and so on, but captured by the department. Another possible one is to require that any firm that's got a successful carbon neutral certification, and maybe all big firms, have to be public about why they say they are carbon neutral. There's to be full disclosure, and that disclosure then would be covered by the consumer law provision. So if you force them to declare certain things or declare the basis of their submissions to Climate Active, that would be covered. Now, once again, I remind you that all I'm talking about are actions to remedy private or government false greenwashing. The biggest issue, however, is root cause analysis of why governments on too many occasions engage in what would, for the private sector, be unlawful greenwashing, and what should be done to remedy. So the government needs to clean up its actions, but we also need independent accountability and enforcement mechanisms.